Alicization feels a lot like what Sword Art Online was meant to be in a lot of ways, both in-universe and without. The new virtual environment of the world Kirito finds himself in and interacts with, and the story itself as a real-life thing are both built upon ideas, dreams that both Kayaba and Reki Kawahara, the author, had, that only now do they have the ability to create, though in Kayaba's case this is through the coworkers he once had instead of he himself like the author. It also showcases the first budding bits of future that Excel World offers, as the two anime take place in the same universe if you didn't already know that. So basically what I'm saying here is Kawahara is Kayaba is Kirito, and they're all learning from their mistakes in this cycle of repetition. One needs look no further than the way the story is presented from the standpoint of Kirito. He's a survivor of the original SAO death game, having learned lessons directly from his experiences and Kayaba himself. And when given the seed from which all the other VR MMO games sprung forth from, Kirito chose to let it be used by anyone who desired it, instead of keeping it for himself. This is a direct ramification of coming into contact with Kayaba's policy of secrecy, and what Kayaba no doubt eventually changed his mind on through his experiences in SAO through contact with people like Kirito or Asuna, or even all the other players in the SAO story. Kayaba's original play didn't work, and ended with his death. And instead of repeating this and following the same path, Kirito does the opposite. Yet that decision is what lands Kirito in the situation he finds himself in, still punished for the actions of self-defense he took in SAO, the crucible that made him a person but also hurt so many other people both mentally and physically. It's a cycle of violence and hatred, one Kirito is desperate to rip himself out of, which is why he tries so hard to create projects like Alice while learning from the mistakes of his predecessor and the mistakes he's made himself. Reki Kawahara is much the same way, as so far Alicization has been an improvement on every aspect of storytelling from the original SAO, which makes sense considering the years of experience, yet it still tells the same basic story. A young man, Kirito, is stuck in a virtual world and must find a way to get himself out while keeping himself alive. The first of these new additions Kawahara has implemented is that the idea of the death game is much more personal, rather than an overarching plot thread that affects many. Kirito can feel pain equivalent to what he would in real life, whereas SAO had its pain receptors dialed back. But so far, we've seen no evidence that dying here in their virtual world will kill him in real life. It's just that Kirito's avoiding that possibility because of the pain he's been experiencing, which causes him to treat the virtual world more as real life than even in SAO, as the implication of death is much more powerful than just outright stating it as Kayaba did at the beginning of SAO. This is also probably intentional on Kikuoka Seijiro's part to complete the Alicization project. What this does is allow some level of mystery on such a core component of the series for the viewers, causing more discomfort than if we were just told he'd die in real life if he died in the game. To Kirito, because he doesn't know if there's respawns, he avoids finding out, which adds more desperation to him personally as a human because he doesn't know. And for the viewer, the question makes the setting much more intriguing because we know much more about Kirito's situation than he does. Perhaps the most pointed growth of Kirito, breaking out of his and Kayaba's cycle, is his willingness to ally himself with the first person he meets, Yujio. While Kayaba also had an ally in the form of Kojiro Rinko, he still closed himself off from her, and refused to do much more than allow her to take care of his body. Kirito, on the other hand, only hides the fact that he knows he's in a simulation of some kind, which could have unintended ramifications on an AI who thinks it's real, so it's kind of understandable he doesn't tell him. But he still allows himself to grow close and trust Yujio and everything else, a far cry from the loner at the start of SAO regarding his relationship with Klein. Kirito's relationships with the women he finds himself stuck around is also different from his time in SAO, and even though the main cause is most likely thanks to dating Asuna, as he's only thinking about her as love interest, it also isn't something that would stop an author from writing in harem elements when they are needed, as Kawahara did in the first series and even a little bit in GGO. Keeping the women friends and confidants without them falling for him instantly really does show growth in Kawahara's writing, however little, as it's less wish fulfillment through caricatures and more about making actual characters. The pacing of the story is much improved in the same way, at least as far as the anime goes, and even despite the time skip we've recently been shown. We're actually given downtime and room to breathe, sometimes for multiple episodes where important things are happening, but with a slower burn. Some people might not like that fact, but I find myself enjoying it quite a lot. Meanwhile, SAO was over the period of 2 years, but most of the time was skipped in favor of big climactic moments, leaving little room for the characters just being characters, and what they experience in the day-to-day life of Aincrad, which is good for a short story to interest viewers immediately, but isn't really good for making characters that you care about. This is something I've heard that Kawahara has expanded upon in SAO Progressive, the retelling of the original SAO story, and it makes sense that his expansion of SAO's pacing coincides with his writing of Alicization. And even putting aside the original SAO, Alicization seems to pull from the entirety of the series as well, picking up strands of story and elements and weaving it together into the narrative for this arc while improving them at the same time. For an example of what I mean, devoting 2 entire episodes to Asuna finding Kirito's body in the real world after it was kidnapped mirrors the ALO arc, while starting the series off with GGO offers a look into what the party is doing for fun together these days, as well as introducing some possible antagonists for later. It feels like there's more planning going into this arc than any of the previous, with focus on creating a larger narrative than just a self-contained essence of the Alicization arcs, like he did with the short story SAO. How this will eventually lead into Excel World also interests me, as time is moving forward toward that point and plot points are starting to connect a little bit more, even if it's still far away at the moment. Hopefully we eventually get a few more connecting threads between the two, because the Sword Art Online Excel World universe has always been very intriguing to me, especially as the cycle begins to repeat. And speaking of cycles of repetition, it's time to let you know that you can find more videos like this one on my channel, so subscribe and hit that notification bell to know exactly when another video of mine goes up after you've already gotten through that old catalog. You can also support me on Patreon at patreon.com/crosswind so I can start making more and longer videos, and please do leave comments either here on the video or on my Twitter, because I love talking to people and responding to their questions. And remember, as long as you're having fun the way you watch anime, that's all that really matters. I'll see you next time.